Hey everyone, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy. Be sure to check out our blog and our YouTube channel and our great sponsors, Your Dolce Vita, Italy Rooting, and Abitivio Casa. And I'm here today with Tom Cesarini, and he's got a great website called Convivio. So welcome, Tom. Thanks for being here.
Bob, thank you. Appreciate you having me. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So before we talk about the website, what's your background? Where's your family from, and when did they arrive into the U.S.?
Yeah, my background. So I'm first generation Italian American. My parents both came from Sicily, a small town called Aspra, right across the Gulf from Palermo. And they came here late 50s, early 60s when they immigrated. Set up shop here, and all these years later, they've got one foot in the old country and one foot in the new country. It's that old standby of who are you really, and then what's your identity when you immigrate. So it's an interesting story. But I was raised very Italian, very Sicilian. I learned Sicilian first before going to school. I'm grateful that they taught it to me. I learned Italian as well. So I started grade school not knowing any English, but my parents said, look, he lives here, he was born here, he's going to figure it out. Best that he has, access to all the languages. So I'm glad they did that. So I was very fortunate. So I grew up very much as an Italophile in terms of the arts, the culture, the heritage, the history, the folklore. So I'm very, very proud of my heritage, my background. So my mother's family came to this country. My dad's family stayed behind. So when they got married, he came out here to be with her, and that was early 60s when they got here.
Wow, that's a great story. Yeah, I love talking to people who, were either born there or,
Yeah.
first generation, because that's really cool for me. My my parents were born here, but some of
Mhm.
my aunts and uncles were born in Italy, and of course, all my grandparents were born there.
Right.
So how did they wind up on the West Coast?
Straight to San Diego. So what happened? The story is this. So on my mother's side, her oldest sister was getting married to an Italian American. And so it was one of those situations where they were, back in Osprey in the old country, and someone came along to my aunt and showed him a picture of this guy and said, "Hey, do you like this guy?" Sure, why not? Next thing you know, they're coming over here. So my grandfather, since she was getting married, that was a little bit more than that. I just kind of make it a little bit whimsical. But my grandfather came out to set up his oldest daughter, my aunt, my mom's sister, and here straight to San Diego. So he was here before anybody. And my grandmother stayed behind with her other four children. So then my grandfather decides, well, to keep the family together, which was a big thing, of course, let's all move there. They really had no intention if not for that. My grandfather worked as a fisherman. He worked in the quarry mines. They were doing okay. They had a great life there. Of course, it was post-war, so it wasn't easy, but there was really no intention to move except for this, what happened with my aunt. So since he was already here, my grandmother packed up her children, her four children. There were three boys and then one girl. The other girl was my mother, and she was 17 at the time. And they came straight here by ship. So that's how they got here. I think it was the USS Constitution. So a couple of weeks, I believe, on the ship, not knowing any English, not liking the food. To me, I equated to going from one planet to another, of course, at the time. So they ended up in Chicago, and by Chicago took a train to San Diego. And my aunt was already located in our Italian neighborhood, which is now Little Italy with the redevelopment that we've had. So they settled there for several years. And that's kind of how the story began with my mom's side. And at 17, my mom went to work at the time there was a San Diego macaroni factory right there in the heart of the neighborhood. So she went straight to work. And the kids helped support the family. The youngest sibling was 5. So he was fortunate because he got to be socialized in the American way, and he went to school and all of that stuff. My mom did get to go to school, take classes, learn English, learned a lot of things, so she enjoyed that. But really, she had to go to work, as did her other 2 brothers. They were older to help support. And then, since she was with my dad back in the old country, she ended up going back to get him. They got married, and then they came together, and that was early 60s. So that's kind of how the story began for them. So it wasn't going the traditional route through Ellis Island. It was straight to the West Coast for them.
Wow, that's so interesting. I'll tell you something funny. Um, I actually, my wife and I, we actually sailed on the Constitution in
Oh, wow.
Hawaii.
Yeah.
They were
That's,
running the Hawaiian cruises back
oh my
when
gosh.
1985. A cool boat.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
that's when ships were ships, right?
Ships. Yeah. There were two, my mom told me. There was the Constitution and there was another, I think, a sister ship.
Independence, the
Independence.
Independence.
There you go. Yep. So she makes reference to that story because it was really um just I don't even know what the word is for them. It was such an experience. And and they were down below third class looking through portholes at this vast ocean, not knowing where they were going, kind of a thing. And it's typical immigrant story, right?
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about those two ships were they were I guess designed either just I think just at the end of the war. I don't know if they were
Yeah.
finished by the end of the war. But when we went on, we sat at the table with the chief engineer, so he gave us a
Oh,
tour
wow.
of the engineering and everything, and he
Wow.
explained to us that when they designed those two ships, they designed them with two radio rooms, two map rooms, two engine rooms.
Hmm.
So if they got hit with a torpedo,
Really?
they'd be able to keep going. Yeah,
Wow. I
isn't
didn't
that
know. Yeah,
interesting?
I knew very little about it. Yeah, wow. Just from their experience of being on the ship and rough waters and the ship going up and down and looking through little holes and things like that, not being able to eat any of the food. They just could not, the smell bothered them, the food bothered them. It was just that kind of thing, crossing the Atlantic. And even when they got here, just getting accustomed to everything was very difficult. But of course they did, as everyone does. But yeah, there's a
Yeah,
great
I'm sure. I'm sure. Now you've been back to
I've been
the
back. It's been a long time since I've been back, but I did go back, fortunately, several times. Meet my father's parents, my grandparents, of course, aunts, uncles, cousins, lots of cousins still there. And a lot of cousins actually, moved out of Italy. They're in different parts of the world, South America, some in Germany, just kind of all over. Some came to Milwaukee, so was fortunate to meet everybody. It's been a long time. I'd like to get back there again, so definitely need to do that. Miss it. There's always a nagging of going back. I think it's a taste of honey is worse than none at all, as they say. So I know what it's like. So it's like, oh, I missed that part of it. I missed that lifestyle, which of course is vastly different than ours here. And there's something to be said about the way of life there for sure.
Oh, definitely. There's no
Yeah.
question. I mean, we went, our first trip was 20 something years ago, and
Mhm.
then we just did the tourist thing. My son was a baby,
Sure.
uh and then we went 2 years ago, and then we went last year to the hometowns and things, and it's a completely different experience,
Completely. Yeah.
the food.
Right.
People think my daughter thought she was going to have the best fettuccine Alfredo in Italy that she ever had. And
No.
I had to break the
Right.
news. It doesn't exist.
No. Yeah. That's our invention here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Exactly.
so funny. So now another funny thing is I have two cousins in San Diego, actually.
Oh, wow.
So I'll have to put you in touch with them.
For sure.
One works at the consulate, and the other one owns a restaurant. And I'll have to look up the name of the restaurant.
At the consonant in LA?
I guess
Has to
I
be,
don't.
yeah.
I guess so. Or
Interesting.
he does something else in San Diego. I'm not
Okay.
sure,
I'm not
but
sure. I'll have to find out.
but
Yeah.
but I know the one has a restaurant, and I'm
Okay.
pretty sure it's in San Diego. So I'll have to check it
Yeah.
out.
Please let me
Uh,
know. That'd be great.
and they're the only other. My grandmother's name was Pio Malo, and
Hmm.
they're the other than my grandmother and her aunt who had come, in 1900s. These two cousins obviously came, I guess, within the last 10 or 15 years or something like that.
I see. So
Uh,
recently,
so
more
they're the
recent.
only other Pio Malos that ever came to America. Everybody else is still back in Italy.
State. So the regions were from where for you, from both sides, your grandmother and your grandfather's?
So my mom's parents were from Torito Bari,
Okay.
so on that side,
Yeah.
and my dad's family was from uh basically around Naples, but they eventually did live in Naples, actually, in the city.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh,
both
okay.
both my grandparents. But my grandfather was born in Pagani,
Okay.
um, outside of there, and my grandmother was born in Massa di Soma, which is now Circola, and
Oh,
that's where they lived, and that's where my my oldest uncle and my two oldest aunts were born there and
We're
lived
born there.
there. And they were, uh, I think my uncle was probably, I want to say about maybe 10 or something like that when they
Hmm.
came. And my aunts were like 6 and 2 or something like that.
And they came straight to New York.
They came straight to New York. They my grandmother's aunt lived here with her husband. They came in
Oh.
1905.
Hmm.
So I don't know why. Both my parents were at the my father was the youngest in his family. My mother was the second youngest. So
Hmm.
my grandparents were older
Yeah,
by that time.
sure.
And you know, I didn't. I was 10. I who thought to ask
Mhm.
questions.
Right, of course.
Um, and I used to play cards with my grandmother, my
Mhm.
mother's mom, and I never thought to ask her about Italy or anything like that.
Sure.
People ask me, when they have these questions, if you could go back in time, who would you want to meet? I'm like my grandmother
Of course. Yeah. So many stories. Yeah. Yeah.
or my
When you're
great
young,
grandparents.
we don't think about it. Now we look back in retrospect and say, oh, in hindsight, should have done this and should have done that. Yeah.
So your they must have been thrilled when you went back when
Yeah.
you were a
Yeah. I
kid.
was again lucky to see them, my dad's side. So a few times. That was great. And just, again, the way of life in a small town, where my parents grew up, seeing that and experiencing that. I kind of scratched my head. Why the heck did you leave? This was great.
I know, I know.
Um, so it's funny now because I look at, I also serve as the honorary consulate in San Diego. So we do a lot of, passport renewals and helping co-nationals with that kind of stuff. People want to get their citizenship, of course, nowadays, their dual citizenship. Students are studying abroad in droves, getting their student visas. And a lot of people now are buying property there, as you know. And it seems like the tables have turned, right? Everyone's leaving the country to go over there instead of back in the day when they would all come over here. So there's this different kind of migration happening. Of course, I put it on a grander scale than it is, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to say is everyone's going over there to say there's got to be a better way. We're missing something here, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I have a very good friend. We went to grammar school together. She moved
Yeah.
to Los Angeles when she was like 18 or 19 or something like that. And
Mhm.
I guess it's 5 or 6 years now. She got a citizenship and
Yeah.
moved to Solano. And,
That's it.
she's
I
decided she always wanted to live there.
Sure. A
And
lot of
that's what she
folks, they're
does.
working mobily, remotely, virtually, whatever. Where they get jobs, they're doing what they can and they love the lifestyle. So good for them. Kudos. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going from my citizenship. I wish I'd done it years ago. But I'm working through an attorney who he'll
Hmm.
be able to do mine and my kids
Oh, good.
together.
Hmm. Oh,
He,
great.
they could petition the court. I'm not going
Yeah,
to go through the council because it'll take a million years in New York City, like Los Angeles.
sure.
I don't have that kind of time,
Yeah.
Uh, but
You have to go through the court system there and try to speed it up.
well, yeah, and they told me it's basically easier because they said we can explain to the judge, um, if there's a difference in a name or a date or something like
Sure.
that, we could present and we could talk to, we have a little bit more flexibility. But the
Yeah.
main thing is, they could do me and the kids all in one petition.
Yeah,
So that makes it that I want them to have it. I mean, they're in their 20s, but I want them to have it because I just think it's good to have,
for sure. Yeah, they get all the benefits of it. Why not? Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I was just talking to my I guess she's my third cousin here in America, and she's got an 8-year-old and 10-year-old. And I said, if you get citizenship, I says, if the kids ever want to go to college there, it's it's like
Right.
10% or something like even less than 10% of what it
Well,
costs here.
everything. Yeah. Health insurance, and you're a citizen of the EU after that, not just Italy. So that's great
Right.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, which is really fantastic. Now,
So how
now
did you?
were you able to how did you get your citizenship?
I
Were
was
you
just going to
able?
ask you the same question. Yeah. So for me, my dad never became a citizen. So it was
Ah,
when he came here, he wanted to retain it. And again, back in the day, there was no dual citizenship. So you had to renounce your citizenship in order to become an American. You had to renounce the Italian one. So he says, heck no, I'm keeping mine. And so he was, he got a green card and he's had a permanent green resident alien status forever since he came. My mom became a citizen though. So she did to bring him over. So I was able to qualify through my dad easily. So at that point, as a minor, my mom just had to send documents in to the consulate because I'm already a citizen because of my father. I was going to ask you the same question. How did you get yours? What was the path? Your great grandparents?
Well, I qualify through everybody.
Yeah.
And so I was going to do it through my father's parents, my father's father. Um, but
Okay.
they were from Naples. And then, the lawyer said, Naples is like, there's a lot of people there and the courts are
Mm,
different and,
wow.
they're very, a little bit more strict. And then so I
Interesting.
decided to go, I qualified through my mother because I was born in 1951. So I
Okay.
was born after 48.
After 48, yeah.
So I qualify. My brother does it through
Yeah.
my brother.
So you're one
Uh,
of the,
and so uh, when we went to Torito last year, and I told them I need the birth and the death, and the birth and then the marriage certificates and all of that. They were just so great. They said, whatever you need, just tell the lawyer, call us. We'll send her the stuff tomorrow. Whenever yes, we'll
yeah.
send it out there. So when you have that connect, because if you try to go through the commune and write them, and if you're lucky if they answer you. Um,
Right.
but if I have it in there now. So, and they said also, when you get the citizenship, then you have to be registered in the commune. And they said
Right.
sometimes that's a pain.
Right.
But they told me the same thing. They said, you're not going to have any problem. You're a citizen of Torito. Don't worry. We love you. And whatever you need, you're going to get. So,
Yeah. So you went to your mom. So at the time of, so tracing it back, your mom was a citizen when you were born.
well,
So
my
just
grandparents, my mom's
before
parents
them.
never became citizens.
That's why. Okay.
Yeah. They never became citizens.
Which means your mom was, which means then you can get it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Right.
My father's parents, my grandmother never became a citizen.
Okay.
My grandfather became a citizen, but it was after my father was born. So
He naturalized after, so that
yeah,
works too. Yeah. So for
yes.
your brother, can't the courts petition? Can't the attorneys petition the court for your brother?
Uh no, I don't think. I think I won't say
I,
positively, but I don't. I think the 48 rule, you can't
thought that
apply through for the maternal line at all.
because of 48, but I thought there was a way to petition the court now. I don't know. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
maybe it's
Yeah.
they're always changing the rules and everything like
Right.
that. So,
Yeah, we
but
don't handle the citizenship here. It all goes through LA, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm
Um,
just curious if
so
the way.
so
Anyway,
let's talk about
sure.
Convivio. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
fantastic website. So,
Thank
you
you.
know, when and why did you start that?
Yeah, so that started 2003. So here in San Diego, I had volunteered prior to that for several groups. We have a lot of, arts and cultural groups, community civic groups in San Diego, kind of all doing their piece to promote Italian culture. But there was, as in so many different regions, right? There's sort of a lack of a common ground. With the Italians, we're very regional and we kind of do our own thing, and the groups can certainly be that way as well, kind of working independently. So I wanted to kind of create a point of reference for the community here, with the goal of establishing some kind of large scale cultural center, a historical resource, a museum, so we can sort of preserve our heritage, and our cultural traditions that were really disappearing here. So now we have, for the past 30 years, we have a new Little Italy here that's been redeveloped. The neighborhood's been redeveloped. It's formally managed by an association, a business improvement district that kind of revitalized the neighborhood economically, and they run it. So we have the business side, but the cultural and heritage side was kind of disappearing. So I wanted to do something in that regard. So I named it Convivio. Convivio, of course, coming together, uniting is inherent in the name. It's that's what it denotes. Um, and that was sort of the impetus to do this. And so through the past 20 years, we've done many, many programs. We've developed digital archives for the community, oral histories that we've preserved, that we've captured, all kinds of different arts and cultural programs, music presentations, concerts, film screenings, educational events and lectures. You name it, we do it. And we do have a base in Little Italy now. It's a small cottage. It's a historical cottage that we run out of. But now we are going to hopefully soon be developing a larger space, and we will have that larger scale cultural center and museum, that we can work out of, hopefully in the next few years. So that's kind of been the trajectory these past 20 some years for Convivio. Kind of a way to unite us all under that umbrella.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and that's kind of why I do what I do,
You
because
know,
I really feel we're, and Michael feels the same way. We feel like the third, fourth, and fifth generations, they don't really have a clue.
right? Yeah, they're just too far removed from it. But hopefully there'll be a resurgence. And I think, and you see some of that, people wanting to know their heritage, their lineage, their background, their culture, and preserve it. As far as much as those ties are getting looser, I think there's somewhat of a return to that and kind of that knowledge of where we come from. It's important to know where we're going, to know where you come from, of course. Not to be cliched, but it is true, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I was scrolling through and looking at the board and some of the people that you have on, and I
Mhm.
found John Mangiapane, and
Yeah.
so and the reason I highlight that is when I was growing up in Corona, Queens, there was a big bakery there, Leonard's,
Hmm.
and the owner was Leonardo Mangiapane.
Japani.
Eat bread, right?
Eat bread. Right.
And
Yeah.
his sons were all boxers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Neat. Yeah,
Uh,
John's great. John is our film consultant. We've done a lot of the oral histories, and the documentary we're working on is with John as our video director and an editor. So he's been instrumental in sort of telling that story of the Italians in San Diego on film. So we're working on a big documentary for that. Something I've wanted to do for some time. We're finally starting to realize that dream.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with PhilItaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Yeah, and so the site though, I mean, it's not exclusive to people who live in San Diego. I mean, yeah, I know you have
No.
a lot of different things out there. You have a
Yeah,
blog and things like that.
right. Yeah, we're focused, of course, on San Diego, but we have, followers and supporters, regionally and certainly nationally and some even globally to follow what we do. We have an event or we have a program that we offer. We get just everyone from different backgrounds who attend, which is great to see that. Italophiles, people, of course, that, grew up in San Diego, but a lot of people from out of town or non-Italians that just want to learn and want to participate, which is always great to see. All roads lead to Rome, right? So,
Yeah, right. No, exactly.
yeah.
Uh, and so what kind of things do you have on the blog?
So the Bob, we have different articles, some on history, some on just general cultural things, some of articles on the blog on what we're doing. So just random, mix of different articles, different posts on our blog, that really hopefully, sort of attract people and get them involved, get them engaged with what we're doing. We might blog about some events that we have, or some, local colors, local stories, different kinds of things. And we have a separate site just for our archives, our digital images, that you can access through conviviosociety.org. It has its own web address, italianarchives.org. And there you can learn about the history of the Italians in San Diego through digital images. And we'll constantly upload images to it. And we'll be uploading videos as well soon.
So that's interesting. So
Yeah.
for people listening, when did the Italians first arrive in San Diego?
So the history of the Italian presence in San Diego goes back to late 1800s. So about 1888, 1886, 1888, we started to see a few start to arrive in San Diego. They settled near the waterfront, of course, the Italian neighborhood down there, which is now Little Italy, right on the waterfront, close to it. And an influx of the Italians came from San Diego. So after the great 1906 earthquake, because a lot of Italians had settled in San Diego, started a fishing industry there, but contributed to it. Then after the quake, the city unfortunately a mess, it's on fire. A lot of Italians heard about fishing in San Diego, which was starting to boom. And the Chinese and Japanese were already here doing some fishing. The Portuguese as well became a prominent group in fishing, as well as other ethnic groups. But after the quake, we see a large influx of Italians come down the coast, and they settled in San Diego and really helped contribute to the start of the fishing industry here. And at first, they were fishing for sardines, rock cod, but then came tuna. And once the tuna industry boomed, San Diego became the tuna capital of the world for decades. So all the tuna in the world was coming out of San Diego. So the cannery started to set up on the waterfront. All the boats would come in. All the groups fished together, and it became a really huge industry here. The women, many of them worked in the canneries, while the men were out fishing. And so the Italian colony was born early 1900s, as it was called, sort of seeing it as an outpost of, the old country. Eventually, pre-war and post-war, that was sort of the heyday of the community here in San Diego for the Italians. It was just known as the Italian neighborhood. And then when the fishing declined in the late 70s, early 80s, and of course our freeway, the Interstate 5, which cut right through the neighborhood when they constructed it in the mid 60s, also broke up the neighborhood. So a lot of Italians moved out. That, with the decline of the fishing industry, kind of started the demise in the neighborhood, among other reasons, but those were two primary ones. And everybody kind of moved out, and the community kind of just fell by the wayside into the 80s. And then in the early 90s, merchants got together and again, they redeveloped the neighborhood to create now a little Italy and kind of, as any community gets gentrified, bring in new business and developers and really kind of bring it back to some kind of glory, which is what they've done. They've done a great job with the revitalization. Um, and a lot of businesses have moved in. We see a lot of new sort of immigrant Italians coming in, business partnerships and business individuals setting up shops here, restaurants and different kind of retail establishments. So San Diego's Little Italy has become sort of a destination for business folks and residents and tourists alike.
That's
And again,
great.
it's
And
formally managed, by the Little Italy Association.
yeah, that's really cool. Our Little Italy is basically gone. The New
Unfortunately,
York
yeah,
Arthur Avenue is still kind of there, but the rest of and in New York there were many, many,
sure,
many.
many of them.
But interesting thing that you said about the interstate cutting through the neighborhood. People don't realize that Italian neighborhoods were split
Right.
by interstates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes me nuts when I see these things where they say,
Sure.
oh,
It's
they
exactly
they
what
split the
happened here.
neighborhood.
Yeah. And through whatever eminent domain, whatever, they took over the houses, the property, they had to move, they were forced to move. So then San Diego was very large. They moved to the suburbs, whatever they had to do. But when I say it cut through the heart of the neighborhood, it literally cut through. If you visit today, that Interstate 5 is going right through what used to be all of the Italian neighborhood. It really just dissected it. Um, west was the water, of course, going east, it cut right through the middle. And again, that with the decline of the fishing industry due to, environmental laws and cheaper imports and things like that, um, unfortunately, the community just kind of, disappeared and through the decades. In the 80s, it was just called Harbor View, for obvious reasons. It had a great view of the harbor there. Back even prior to that, early on, it was called Middletown. We have Old Town San Diego, we have Newtown, of course, downtown. Middletown was where it's situated now in between. So Middletown is where the Italian colony kind of, sprang from. And then,
And
of course,
and
the
and,
neighborhood.
and I'm guessing because they were close to the water, they must have been impacted during the war, right? Big time.
Yeah, and what during the war, it's interesting because the government actually acquisitioned many of the fishing boats to patrol the South Pacific. So a lot of the fishermen saw their boats taken, saying, "Hey, we need your boats to go patrol." They eventually did get them back, but that also did put a sort of a halt to the fishing for that time period during the war. And even during the war on the streets, there was a warden, air raid warden. There was, we talked actually about a lot of the Japanese American internment, the camps. And the same thing happened to the Italians, not in great numbers like the Japanese, but it happened to them as well. In San Diego, a government official would come, and there are many stories of people knocking on, residents' doors saying, "We need to check your papers," basically. And the irony, of course, is you had a lot of the soldiers, the Italian American boys, were fighting, overseas. The women were involved in the war effort, the men were involved in the war effort, of course, and they're getting knocks on their door saying, you guys are enemy aliens. So, um, what's going on there? That was the time. So that's a little known story that needs to be told as well. So many stories. The Italians, Americans had curfews in the neighborhood. Some officials confiscated shortwave radios. So many stories of that during the wartime. Yeah.
Yeah, I have my mom's parents. I have their alien registration cards,
Do
or at
you?
least photo of it. You
Yeah.
know, So, it has that picture, and they were,
Yeah,
they were, I guess, in their late 50s, early
sure.
60s,
Right.
uh, but I didn't know that they actually confiscated the boats. That's something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Took the boats for quite some time. And yeah, they sent them down and, make sure everything's cool down there, as it were. Many of the boats, because at that point, the fishing started with little bait boats. They were small, of course, bamboo pole fishing. But then a lot of the Italian innovations, they started going to what was called super seiners. They had big nets with rigs and automatic, machinery. These boats were huge, so they could travel farther. So, that was eventually in the 60s and 70s. But as the boats progressed, there were a lot of bigger boats that the government could acquisition, and they would call them yard patrol boats, YP boats, yippies colloquially. They were known as yippies.
That's
Yeah.
something.
So a
Um,
lot of stories of those as well here in San Diego.
well, and my uncle, because he was left behind by my grandparents, after the war, they stopped the immigration.
Right.
My whole family was here except for my one uncle. And at the end of the war, my grandmother had four sons in the service, and he had to wait in Canada for like 4 or 5
Oh, wow.
years.
Sure.
Yeah, it
Yep.
didn't matter that his
No,
brothers fought in the war.
no, I know. That's what was going on at the time. So to me, again, a lot of history that needs to be told, trying to preserve as many stories as we can like that in San Diego, through a more formal process, of course. And hopefully we have a space someday where we can share those. Digitally, it's great. We can do a lot digitally nowadays, and that's very important. But I think having a physical space where people can come together is also important, and they can join and kind of learn together. So that's what we're about.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if it opened yet, but the new museum in Little Italy is either just open or it's about to open. I mean, they're like years behind.
Right.
Um,
I
but
know they were
they,
developing a new building. Yeah.
yeah, it's a bespoke building just for us.
Mhm.
It was in like an old bank building before or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah.
And now they're gonna have, exhibits and rotating exhibits and media rooms and
Great.
things
Yeah.
like that. So,
That's something that we want to do for San Diego. Again, there's a huge Italian presence here, through the decades. Again, going back to the 1880s. Um, Such a strong presence, such a strong influence in San Diego. And unfortunately, those stories are disappearing, and that heritage is disappearing. So we really need to do something to preserve it. Yeah.
well, and that's important because, us New Yorkers,
Mhm.
we we'll tell you that, all the Italians are in New York.
Right. True.
And I
Exactly.
found that, they're all over the country. They're in
Sure.
Ohio, they're in Pennsylvania, they're in San
Right. Oh,
Diego, San
yeah.
Francisco, Texas, Colorado.
Everywhere. There's a lot of museums and cultural centers, nationally everywhere. Yeah, all over the place. Yeah, doing some great
Um,
work.
so before we go, Tom, where can people find Convivio?
Yeah, our website is conviviosociety.org. All the information is on there. They can follow through the social channels, of course, at Convivio Society. They can learn about what we do. They can link to our archive site through there. There's a page on heritage in San Diego and shows some of the oral histories we've done, some of the things we're working on. They can link to the digital images through Convivio Society as well. And some of the things we do now, our programs and events, they can see all of that in our background. And then also links to the consulate. So for those people that live in Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, the jurisdiction is Los Angeles. So if they need help with anything that's consular related, we also help them as well through the consulate, honorary consulate office in San Diego.
That's fantastic. That's
Yeah.
really great.